I watched the $40,000 vanish from our joint savings account in a single heart-stopping transaction, the screen of my laptop glowing like a crime scene in our dark bedroom. My wife, Sarah, was sitting on the edge of the bed, her face buried in her hands, her shoulders shaking with the kind of heavy, soul-crushing sobs that make you want to move mountains to help. She told me her brother, Leo, was on an operating table 3 states away, his heart failing, and that this experimental procedure was his only chance at seeing his 30th birthday. But 3 days later, I was standing in the back of a high-end country club ballroom, watching Sarah, dressed in a gown that cost more than my first car, laughing as she handed a giant ceremonial check to the principal of her old high school, while her dying brother stood next to her, looking tan, healthy, and perfectly fine. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand why that night in the ballroom destroyed every single thing I believed about my life, I need to take you back to where the cracks first started to show. Sarah and I had what everyone called the perfect marriage. We'd been together for 8 years, married for 5, and we were the couple our friends came to for relationship advice. We had our routines, the Saturday morning trips to that little hole-in-the-wall bakery on 4th Street where she'd always steal the icing off my cinnamon roll, and the way she'd call me Birdie because of how I used to whistle when I was nervous. We were saving for a house, a real one with a yard for the golden retriever we'd already named. We had $42,000 in that account, every penny earned through overtime shifts and skipped vacations. We were happy, or at least I was. The first crack didn't feel like a crack at all. It felt like a quirk. About 6 months ago, Sarah started talking about her 15-year high school reunion. Now, Sarah didn't grow up rich. She grew up in a town where your last name determined your future, and her last name didn't carry any weight. She'd told me stories about the elites, a group of girls who had made her life miserable, mocking her clothes and her used car. I thought she wanted to go back to show them she'd done well for herself. I didn't realize that doing well wasn't enough for her. She wanted to reign over them. That should have been my first warning. But what came next was so much worse. The unraveling began on a Tuesday night in October. I came home to find Sarah collapsed on the kitchen floor, the phone lying next to her. She looked like she'd seen a ghost. Through gasping breaths, she told me Leo had collapsed, a congenital heart defect no one knew about. He was in a private clinic in Florida, and insurance wouldn't cover the immediate surgery required to save him. "It's $40,000, Mark," she'd whispered, her eyes red and desperate. "If we don't send it tonight, he won't make it to morning. I'll pay it back. I'll work 3 jobs. I'll do anything. Please, don't let my brother die." I didn't even hesitate. I loved Leo, and I loved my wife. I transferred the money right there at the kitchen table. If that was all I found, maybe I could have lived with it. Maybe I could have chalked it up to a momentary lapse in judgment. But then I checked the mail 2 days later. I found a receipt from a high-end catering company addressed to Sarah. It was for a platinum reunion gala at the Oak Ridge Country Club. The deposit was $12,000. My stomach did a slow, sickening roll. I told myself it was a mistake, or maybe she was just helping plan it. But the doubt was a poison, and it was already in my bloodstream. I did something I'd never done in 8 years. I looked at her iPad while she was in the shower.
I found an email chain that made my blood turn to ice. It wasn't just a reunion. Sarah was the sole sponsor of the Sarah Jenkins Legacy Gala. She wasn't just attending, she was funding the entire event for her graduating class. She'd hired a professional PR firm to write a bio for the program that described her as a venture capitalist and philanthropist. She was buying the prestige she felt she'd been denied as a teenager. And that's when I realized this wasn't just a one-time lie. This was a calculated, months-long architectural feat of deception. I scrolled further and found the medical emails. There were no doctors. There was only a friend of hers from high school, a guy named Marcus who worked in graphic design, who had mocked up the fake hospital invoices she'd shown me to justify the emergency. I felt a cold rage settle over me. It wasn't the hot, screaming kind of anger. It was the kind that makes your vision go sharp and your heart beat slow and steady. I knew exactly what I was going to do, but I had to be patient. I had to let her think she was winning. For the next week, I was the perfect, grieving, supportive husband. I asked how Leo was doing after surgery. She told me he was in recovery, still weak, but the doctors say it's a miracle. I watched her cry on cue, wondering how many of our perfect moments over the last 8 years had been scripted. She told me she had to go to her hometown for a few days to help her mom while Leo recovered. I kissed her forehead, told her I loved her, and watched her drive away in the car I'd helped pay for. The night of the gala, I didn't go to work. I drove 3 hours to her hometown. I parked my car 2 blocks from the Oak Ridge Country Club and sat in the dark, watching the Ferraris and Lexuses pull up to the valet. I felt like a ghost haunting my own life. I waited until I knew the program was starting. I'd seen the schedule on her iPad. 8 p.m., the keynote presentation. I walked into that ballroom through the service entrance. The air smelled of expensive lilies and steak. And there she was, my Sarah. She was standing on a stage under a spotlight, wearing a shimmering emerald gown that I knew with a sickening certainty had been bought with our house deposit. She looked radiant. She looked like a queen. And standing right next to her, holding a glass of champagne and laughing at a joke, was Leo. He wasn't in a hospital bed. He wasn't clutching his chest. He was wearing a tuxedo, looking like he'd just stepped off a yacht. I walked toward the stage, the crowd of 100 people parting as they noticed a man in a rumpled flannel shirt and jeans moving through their sea of silk and sequins. Sarah didn't see me at first. She was too busy basking in the applause. I just want to say, Sarah's voice projected through the speakers, that giving back to the school that shaped me has always been my dream. Success is hollow if you don't share it with the community that raised you. Is that right, Sarah? I said. I didn't shout. I didn't have to. The microphone on the podium picked up my voice and boomed through the ballroom. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the kind that makes your ears ring. Sarah froze. I watched the color drain from her face so fast I thought she might actually faint. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She looked like a fish gasping for air. Her hands, which had been gracefully gesturing a moment ago, flew to the edge of the podium, gripping it so hard her knuckles turned white. "Mark," she whispered into the mic, her voice cracking. What are you doing here?" I stepped up onto the stage. Leo tried to step in front of her, his face a mask of panicked confusion. "Hey man, let's talk outside." I ignored him. I looked directly at Sarah. "How's the heart, Leo? You look pretty good for a guy who was on an operating table 4 days ago. It's a medical miracle, isn't it?"
The elites in the front row started whispering. I could see the confusion turning into juicy realization on their faces. They were getting a better show than they'd paid for. "Mark, please," Sarah hissed, leaning away from the microphone, her eyes darting toward the exits. "You're embarrassing yourself. We can talk about this at home." "Oh, we aren't going home, Sarah," I said, my voice calm and conversational. I pulled a thick manila envelope from under my arm. "I brought some light reading for your donors. I have the bank statements showing the $40,000 you stole from our savings, money meant for our future home, to pay for this party. I have the emails between you and Marcus where you planned the emergency surgery scam. And I have the real medical records for Leo, who, as it turns out, just had a very expensive hair transplant last month." I saw the moment she realized there was no way out. Her eyes went wide and glassy, and she looked around the room at the people she had spent $40,000 to impress. They weren't looking at her with envy anymore. They were looking at her with pity and disgust. The distinguished alumna was just a con artist in a borrowed dress. "I did it for us," she suddenly shrieked, her composure finally snapping. "I wanted people to respect us. I wanted to be someone, Mark. You don't know what it's like to be the girl with the holes in her shoes." "I loved the girl with the holes in her shoes," I said, and for the first time my voice trembled. "But I don't even know who you are." I turned to the audience, many of whom were filming this on their phones. "Enjoy the party, everyone. It's literally the most expensive night of her life." I walked off that stage and didn't look back. I could hear her starting to scream my name, followed by the sound of something breaking, probably a glass or a centerpiece, but I didn't stop. I walked out into the cool night air, and for the first time in months, I could actually breathe. The aftermath was swift. I filed for divorce the next morning and had her served at her mother's house. She tried to come back, of course. She sent hundreds of texts, left dozens of voicemails, ranging from "I'm so sorry" to "You ruined my life." I didn't listen to a single one. I sold everything we had, split what was left of the liquidated assets, and moved to a city where no one knew my name or my perfect marriage. People ask me if I'm bitter about the money. $40,000 is a lot to lose, but honestly, it was a bargain. That money bought me the truth. It bought me the rest of my life, free from a woman who valued the applause of strangers over the heart of the man sleeping next to her. I still go to the bakery on 4th Street sometimes, but now I eat the icing off my own cinnamon roll, and it tastes a whole lot better than I remembered.